The photograph measures exactly 4 inches by 6, standard cabinet card dimensions, for the year 1897. It shows a family, the Blackwells, seated in their parlor on Ashcroft Lane. The father stands behind, hand resting on his wife's shoulder. 3 children arranged before them, 2 boys, 1 girl. The exposure is crisp, unusually so for indoor photography of that era. Every face is clear, every detail preserved. But there is something in this photograph, something that wasn't noticed immediately, not by the photographer, not by the family. Look at the window behind them. The curtains are drawn back, daylight streaming through, and in that window, reflected in the glass, the room is empty. 1897 was a year of transition, the Victorian era drawing toward its close, but its obsessions still held firm. Photography had evolved beyond mere novelty. It had become evidence, proof of existence, of presence. The chemical processes were still volatile. Silver nitrate solutions, albumin coatings, collodion emulsions that required steady hands, and absolute stillness from the subject. A portrait sitting could take 15 minutes. Any movement would blur, any breath might ghost across the plate. But the Blackwell photograph is perfectly still, every figure frozen, as if they had become something other than living. The home itself stood on the western edge of Ashcroft, a mill town in Lancashire, where the air tasted of coal smoke and damp wool, and the particular sourness of the River Calder. Tuberculosis moved through such towns like fog. Typhoid lingered in the water. Diphtheria took children without warning. Death was ordinary. But what happened to the Blackwells was not ordinary. Thomas Blackwell was a foreman at Hargreaves Mill, a respected man, methodical, known for fairness with his workers. His wife, Catherine, had been a school teacher before marriage, literate, uncommon for a woman of her station. She kept a diary. 3 volumes of it survived, until they were destroyed in 1943 during the Ashcroft Archive fire. But transcriptions exist, fragments held in private collections. The children were unremarkable in the best sense. James, 12 years old, apprenticed to a printer. William, 10, still in school, and Eleanor, 8 years old, who loved to sketch, particularly birds. They were, by all accounts, a normal family. Until the morning of October 14th, 1897. The photographer was a man named Silas Brennan, traveling portraitist, who passed through Lancashire twice a year. He arrived at the Blackwell home at 9:30. His equipment was standard: a large format camera, wooden tripod, glass plates prepared the night before. Catherine Blackwell had commissioned the portrait as a gift for her mother, who was ill in Sheffield. The family arranged themselves in the parlor. Brennan positioned the camera, adjusted the aperture, instructed them to remain still. The exposure took 12 minutes. This is documented. Brennan recorded it in his ledger. 12 minutes of absolute stillness. When it was finished, he thanked them, packed his equipment, and left. The time was recorded as 10:48 in the morning. By noon, the house was empty. The first person to notice was Margaret Hollins, a neighbor, who had agreed to borrow a cup of lard from Catherine that afternoon. She knocked at 12:30. No answer. She tried the door. It opened, unlocked. The house was not in disarray. Nothing was overturned, nothing broken. But it was profoundly quiet. Mrs. Hollins called out. No response. She moved through the parlor, the kitchen, the upstairs rooms. No one. But the stove was still warm. Bread dough had been left rising, covered with a damp cloth in the kitchen. Thomas Blackwell's coat hung on its peg. His work boots stood by the door. Upstairs, Eleanor's bed had been made neatly. Her doll sat on the pillow. Everything suggested continuation, not departure. Mrs. Hollins summoned the constable, a man named Arthur Pembridge, who arrived within the hour. His investigation was thorough, meticulous even, by the standards of the time. He noted in his report that the back door was also unlocked, but showed no signs of forced entry. No footprints in the garden, despite recent rain, that had left the soil soft. No signs of struggle, no blood, no disturbance. It was as if the family had simply evaporated.
The investigation expanded quickly. Neighbors were questioned. No one had seen the Blackwells leave. No one had heard anything unusual. No sounds of distress, no carriage, no footsteps. The mill was contacted. Thomas Blackwell had not appeared for his shift at 2 o'clock, which was unprecedented. The schoolmaster confirmed that William had not attended classes that afternoon. But here, the first true anomaly emerged. From the testimony of James Blackwell's employer, a printer named Morris Ashford. James had arrived at the print shop that morning at 8 o'clock, as usual. He had worked, without incident, until approximately 10:30, at which point, Ashford reported, the boy had stopped working mid-task, setting down a form of type. He had turned, walked to the door, and left, without speaking, without explanation. Ashford called after him, received no response. He described the boy's expression as blank, not distressed, not afraid, simply absent. This was at 10:32, 16 minutes before the photographer left the Blackwell home. And yet, James appears in the photograph, seated, perfectly still, among his family. The photograph was not developed immediately. Silas Brennan continued his circuit, through Lancashire into Yorkshire. He processed the plate, 3 days later, in a rented darkroom in Leeds. The image appeared normal at first. A well-composed family portrait, properly exposed, sharp. But when he examined it more closely, under magnification, he noticed the window, the reflection in the glass, which should have shown the interior of the room, the family themselves, the camera. Instead, it showed nothing, an empty parlor, as if the subjects were not there. Brennan assumed initially a flaw in the glass plate, a double exposure, but the rest of the image was flawless, and he had been meticulous, as always, in his preparation. He sent the photograph by post to the Blackwell residence on October 18th. It was returned to him 11 days later, marked "Address Unknown." He learned, through a local newspaper, of the family's disappearance, and he contacted the authorities immediately. Dr. Harold Wickham, a physician with an interest in neurology, was consulted. He examined the photograph. At the request of Constable Pembridge, his assessment, recorded in a letter dated November 2nd, 1897, is preserved in the Lancashire Constabulary Archives. He wrote, "The anomaly in the window reflection cannot be explained by conventional photographic error. The glass surface shows clear evidence of reflection. Light sources are appropriately rendered. Yet the human figures appear absent from this reflected space. I am forced to consider, however improbable, that the subjects were not fully present at the moment of exposure." He went on to speculate about dissociative states, mass hysteria, neurological synchronicity, terms that meant nothing in 1897, but suggested everything. The house remained empty. Weeks passed, then months. The Blackwell's extended family came forward. Catherine's mother, still living in Sheffield. Thomas's brother, a clerk in Manchester. None had heard from them. None could offer explanation. The house was eventually cleared, by order of the local magistrate, in April of 1898. The contents were catalogued, sold, dispersed. Catherine's diaries were sent to her mother, who kept them until her own death in 1904. They passed through 3 more hands before the archive fire consumed them. But one entry survives, transcribed by a local historian in 1938, dated October 13th, 1897, the day before the photograph. Catherine wrote, "I have had the strangest feeling all day, as if I am watching myself from elsewhere. Thomas remarked on it at supper, said I seemed distant, not unwell, but removed. The children are restless. Eleanor asked me this afternoon if it was possible to be in 2 places at once. I could not answer her." The photograph changed hands several times. Silas Brennan kept it until his death in 1912. His estate was liquidated, the photograph purchased by a private collector, a man named Edmund Greer, who specialized in, as he termed it, photographic curiosities. Greer exhibited the image once in London at a symposium on spirit photography in 1923. The response was unsettling. Multiple attendees reported feeling ill after prolonged viewing. One woman fainted, describing, upon revival, a sensation of being pulled backward through the photograph. Greer withdrew the image from public display permanently. The house on Ashcroft Lane was demolished in 1961 to make way for a housing estate, the construction crew reported. Difficulties, equipment malfunctions, unexplained delays, workers refusing to enter certain rooms before demolition. One foreman, a man named Peter Caldwell, reported finding, in the space behind the parlor wall, 5 pairs of shoes arranged neatly, side by side, 2 adult, 3 child. The leather was preserved almost perfectly, despite 64 years. They were photographed, then discarded during site clearing. The photograph of the shoes, if it still exists, has not been located. In 2006, a researcher named Dr. Fiona Marsh from the University of Edinburgh published a paper in the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena, examining cases of spontaneous, collective disappearance. She referenced the Blackwell case, alongside 17 others from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Her conclusion was tentative, but striking. She proposed that certain photographic processes, combined with specific neurological states, might create what she called localized temporal displacement, a folding of the present moment into itself, leaving behind only the image of what had been. Her paper was not well received. It remains largely uncited. The photograph itself resurfaced briefly in 2014 at an estate auction in Yorkshire. It sold for £420 to an anonymous buyer who has not come forward since. Attempts to locate it through private collectors and photographic historians have failed. It may be that the photograph is intentionally hidden, kept from examination, or it may be that it has been destroyed. Some things should not be preserved.
The Blackwell family, Thomas, Catherine, James, William, and Eleanor, were never found. No bodies, no graves, no records of travel or relocation. They exist now, only in that single image, frozen in a moment that may never have been fully real. And in the window behind them, the reflection that shows what they were not. An empty room, waiting for something that had already left. The question remains, not where they went, but whether they were ever truly there. If you found this story unsettling, if it made you question the nature of presence and absence, subscribe to this channel for more forgotten cases from the edges of documented history. And perhaps look more carefully at your own photographs, at what appears in them and what does not.